And welcome back, my LLs, my Lubari listeners, my fellow real estate investors and fellow real estate enthusiasts. Welcome back to another episode of the Lubari Real Estate Podcast, where we deep dive into the world of multifamily real estate investing and equip you with the knowledge to make smarter, more confident investment decisions. I am your host, Jason Lubari Olds, and today we're tackling a topic that every real estate investor, especially your limited partners, otherwise known as LPs, needs to understand: capital calls. So let's get into it. All right, so we all know capital calls can be a source of stress, confusion, and sometimes even some frustration. But they're also an important mechanism for keeping an investment afloat when unexpected situations arise. So let's break down what capital calls are, when they happen, and what to watch out for, and how you can prepare for them. All right, so what is a capital call? Simply put, a capital call is when a syndicator, general partner, or fund manager requests additional funds from investors beyond the initial capital commitment. All right, this can happen for a variety of reasons. And while not always ideal, it's sometimes necessary to maintain or even enhance the value of the investment. So capital calls are usually outlined in the operating agreement, or PPM, the private placement memorandum of the deal. So when you invest, you should already know whether a capital call is a possibility, under what circumstances it may occur. Okay, so when do capital calls usually happen? There are going to be several situations where capital calls might be necessary. So let's go through some of the most common, shall we? All right, so unforeseen expenses, that's a common one. So that includes unexpected repairs, major maintenance issues, or sudden economic shifts that require more liquidity to stabilize the property. All right. You also may need one in a market downturn or during rent fluctuations. So if the property isn't generating enough income due to lower occupancy or reduced rents, additional capital may be needed to meet the debt obligations. Another reason is cost overruns on renovations. So if a value add project runs over budget, a capital call may be necessary to complete renovations and execute the business plan. Or it may be something to do with debt restructuring or refinancing needs. Sometimes you may have to do a cash in refinance. All right, that's a little different. But in some cases, a capital call may be required to meet lender requirements, or even cover interest rate increases, or just to prevent a default on a loan. And then the last common one that we have are depleted reserves. So if the property's reserve funds run out due to prolonged vacancies or operational inefficiencies, the capital call, or a capital call, can be the only way to keep things running smoothly. And we always want to keep things running smoothly now, don't we? Yes, we do. Okay, so let's talk about what happens when a capital call is made. If a capital call is initiated, here's what typically happens. The general partner or syndicator will notify the investors, explaining why additional capital is needed, how much is required, and what the timeline is for contributions. All right, so investors are usually given about a 30 to 90 day window to provide the requested funds. Depending on the structure of the investment, participation may be mandatory. All right, so but that's if it's agreed upon in the PPM. All right, or it can also be voluntary when investors have the choice to contribute or not. Okay, but here's the caveat to that. So if an investor chooses not to participate, there may be consequences. This could include dilution of ownership percentage, reduced future distributions, or in extreme cases, loss of rights or interest in the investment. Okay, so here's some of the things that you should really watch out for and pay attention to. All right, so while these capital calls are sometimes necessary, they can also signal potential red flags. And here are some things to watch out for. Poor financial planning. So if a sponsor is making frequent capital calls, it could indicate poor underwriting, unrealistic budgeting, or bad asset management. You don't want that, okay? So another thing to look out for is lack of communication. If investors aren't being kept in the loop about financials, then suddenly get hit with a capital call, that's a warning sign of poor transparency. Like we mentioned in the last podcast, in the last episode about investor calls, you want to be open and transparent at all times. If it's good news, tell your investors. If it's bad news, tell your investors. If there's no news or everything is the same, tell your investors. Always be honest, open, and transparent no matter what. All right. So another thing is over leverage. So properties that take on excessive debt can be at higher risk of capital calls when interest rates rise or cash flow tightens. Now, you may start to see a little more of these with certain types of debt structures, such as, bridge loans, because bridge loans typically aren't fixed rate debt. They can fluctuate. And if that happens, your debt service is going to increase. So you're going to have to pay more on your mortgage. And if you're already hitting the fence financially with your business plan, then you may need a capital call. So watch out for that. So as an investor, LP or GP, always make sure that your financials are straight. That way you can be prepared for things like these. Always have cash in reserve. And we'll talk more about that later. All right. Next is weak market conditions. So if a deal relies on aggressive rent growth assumptions that don't materialize, capital calls might be needed to cover the gap. As a GP, it's very important to always be conservative with your underwriting. Always know your left and your right limits. Know how much your break even is, know your best case scenarios, and know your worst case scenarios. And you as an LP should also be aware of these left and right limits, so you know how the deal could possibly perform in any type of market situation. All right. And then lastly, we have poor property performance. If a property is consistently underperforming without a clear plan, a capital call just might be a temporary fix rather than a long-term solution. So it all depends on the type of situation that the property is in. So a small capital call may be needed just to keep it afloat, and then boom, you never know. But keep an eye out for these red flags, because they're typically a sign that your general partners or your sponsors may have not had the best planning or aren't being completely upfront with you. Okay, so just take a mental note of that and keep an eye out for it. And always read your PPM. Always read all your loan agreements and your subscription agreements, of course. Okay, now let's talk about how to prepare for and manage capital calls. So as an investor, there are a few ways to protect yourself and prepare for the possibility of a capital call. Number one, I just said it. Read the PPM and operating agreement. Please do this. It's in your own best interest. So before investing, always understand the capital call provisions and whether they are mandatory or voluntary. Another thing you might want to do is assess the sponsor's track record. Work with experienced operators who have a history of conservative underwriting and strong asset management. Do your own due diligence as well. And like I mentioned earlier, keep additional reserves. It's always good to have extra liquidity set aside in case a capital call arises, so you can participate and avoid dilution or the loss of your rights as an investor. Okay, next, you want to monitor financials and ask questions. Stay engaged with your investor reports. Ask about occupancy trends and understand how the property is performing. If you don't know, ask. And then lastly, diversify your investments. Spreading your investments across multiple properties and markets can reduce the impact of a capital call on any one deal. All right, so in conclusion, I like conclusions. Capital calls are not inherently bad. They are simply a tool that can be used wisely or misused depending on the situation. The key is being informed, working with the right investors, and always having a plan for handling unexpected financial needs. And now we move on to my favorite part of the podcast, where we talk about what real estate can do for you. So as you guys know, spring is right around the corner. And that means it's time to get on two wheels. It's warming up. I need to take my baby out and I need to hit the streets. I need to be in the streets on Sundays on my bike, ripping and running, enjoying myself, enjoying my freedom, and linking up with other bikers and just having a good time. I love riding motorcycles. I got a 2020 Yamaha R6, and that is my baby. So I'm definitely looking forward to hitting the streets, getting all my gear on, riding safely, but having fun. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, you know yeah. But anyway, that's it for me. That's it for me. I'm a simple guy. I don't like too much, but I do like to have fun. All right. Oh, as always, real estate investing is about being prepared and staying educated. So, if you got any value from today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, hit that like button. Go ahead, hit that like button. I see you looking at it. Go ahead, hit it. What I do that for? And share this with fellow real estate investors who need to hear it. All right. So if you have any questions about capital calls or other investing topics, reach out to me at Jason, that's JAISUN, at lubari.com. All right. That's LOUBARRI.com. That's my email. Or you reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Instagram or on Facebook. Anywhere you can find me, I'll be there. I'm here for you guys. This is what I do. All right. So thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Lubari Real Estate Podcast, and I'll see you next Tuesday. I love you all and be blessed.